Welcome back to Lady Mythos. Come in out of the cold, sit down, and let me build the fire back up. Because tonight, we are going somewhere I have been waiting to take you. There is one country in all the world that no god rules by choice. You go in, and you do not come out. The dead go there, and they stay. The Sumerians called it the land of no return. And even the gods spoke of it the way you might speak of a closed room at the top of the house that you learned as a child never to open. And one day, the brightest, proudest, most powerful goddess who ever lived put on her crown and walked straight toward its gate. Alive. If you were here last time, you already know her. Inanna, the Queen of Heaven, the morning and the evening star, the goddess who was love and war in a single body. In the first part of this story, we watched her take everything the living world had to offer. She stole the powers of civilization off a drunk god without lifting a blade. She burned a mountain that would not bow to her. She loved a shepherd, and she broke a king. And she made even the great Gilgamesh pay for wounding her pride. By the end, she held the sky and the earth in her two hands. And it was not enough, because there was still one door she had never opened, one throne she had never sat upon, one realm that did not answer to her name, and a hunger like hers cannot bear a closed door. If you have not seen part 1, there is a card up in the corner you can tap once we are done here, and I would start there, because everything she is about to lose, she won in that first tale. But you do not need it to feel this one. All you need to know is that she is standing at the very edge of the world of the living, and she is about to step off it. Everything she carried up from that first story, every crown and every victory, is about to be taken from her, one piece at a time, in the dark. So here is the question I want you to hold all the way down, into the black, to the very last minute of this video. Why would a goddess who already has everything walk into the one place even gods do not come back from? And then, the darker half of that question, the one that will not let either of us go by the end. What will it cost her to climb back out? Because she does climb back out. I will tell you that much now, so you can stop bracing for it. She comes back. It is the how that you are not ready for. Do me a small kindness before we begin. Subscribe, so the dark does not lose you halfway down. And I want something real from you tonight, not just a like. By the end of this story, Inanna is going to make a single choice, and it is one of the coldest choices in all of mythology. And I need you to tell me, down in the comments, whether you think she was a monster for making it, or whether she simply had no choice at all. Do not answer yet. You do not have enough of the story yet. Just hold the question. We begin at the top of the stairs, with a goddess deciding to do something that no one in all the ages of the world had ever done and walked away from. Chapter 1. She set her heart on the land of no return. It starts with the decision that nobody asked her to make. The old poem puts it in a strange, quiet line. She set her ear, it says, toward the great below. That is the Sumerian way of saying she turned her whole attention downward, away from heaven, away from earth, away from everything she had spent her entire life conquering, and she pointed it down, into the country of the dead. One line, and everything that follows pours out of it. Here the storytellers give us two different reasons why, and I am not going to choose between them for you, because I think the truth of her lives in the space between the two. The first reason is the one most people tell, and it is pure Inanna: ambition. Her older sister, Ereshkigal, ruled the underworld from a throne of her own, the one queen in all of creation who did not bow to the Queen of Heaven. And Inanna, who had never in her life been able to leave a single crown unclaimed, looked down into the dark and wanted that one too. She did not want to visit the land of the dead. She wanted to own it. But there is a second reason, quieter and stranger, and to me far sadder, and it reaches all the way back into part 1. Ereshkigal, the queen below, was in mourning. Her husband had died. And who was her husband? Some tellings give him the name Gugalana, which means the great bull of heaven. The very same bull of heaven that Inanna herself had demanded from the gods and unleashed on Gilgamesh, and that Gilgamesh and Enkidu had brought down in the dust. Follow that thread, and the whole story changes shape. In this version, Inanna is not marching down to seize a throne at all. She is going to a funeral. She is going, however unwelcome, to stand beside a grieving sister at the death of a husband that her own rage helped to cause. Ambition, or grief, or perhaps both, tangled so tightly together that even she could not have told you which one moved her feet. That is the goddess we are following down. And I love that the oldest storytellers left it unresolved, because people are like that. We rarely do the biggest things in our lives for one clean reason. We tell ourselves it is grief when it is pride, or pride when it is grief. And the honest answer is usually a knot of both. Whatever her reason, she prepared for it like a woman going to war, or to a coronation, or to her own execution. And it was a little of all three. She gathered the 7 great ornaments of her power, the divine emblems, the sacred me she had carried since the first story, and she put them on one at a time, like armor. The tall crown of the open country on her head, a rod and a measuring line of gleaming blue lapis in her hand, the very symbols of a ruler's right to judge. Small lapis beads strung at her throat, a double strand of shining, egg-shaped stones across her breast, a gold ring for her wrist, a breastplate over her heart, and over all of it, the royal robe of a queen. She dressed herself in everything she was, until she blazed like the evening star made flesh. And here is the detail that tells you she was not a fool, that she walked into this with her eyes wide open. Before she took a single step down, she called her most trusted servant to her side. Her name was Ninshabur, and she was loyal the way very few beings in any story are loyal. The kind of loyal that does not blink. And Inanna gave her precise instructions, the way a careful person leaves a letter to be opened only if they do not come home. "If I do not return in 3 days," she said, "then mourn for me, Beat the drum for me in the assembly of the gods. Tear at your eyes and your mouth. Dress yourself in a single rough garment like a beggar, with nothing left. And go. Go first to the temple of Enlil, the great god of the air. And if he will not help you, go to Nurna, the moon. And if he turns his face away too, then go to Enki, the god of wisdom and the deep, sweet waters. Because Enki knows the food of life and the water of life. And Enki, of all the gods, will not leave me hanging in the dark. She had a plan. She had thought of everything. She had built her own rescue before she ever needed it, laid it out step by step in the hands of the one person she trusted. And then she kissed that faithful servant and turned to face the gate of the dead, certain she had covered every possibility. She had not. Because there is one thing the Underworld does to every single soul who enters it. No exceptions, not even for the Queen of Heaven. And it happens long, long before you ever reach the throne. Chapter 2. The Seven Gates, Stripping the Queen of Heaven. She knocked on the outer gate of the Underworld, and she did not knock softly. "Open up," she called. "Open the door, gatekeeper. Open it for me. And if you do not, I will smash the door and shatter the bolt. I will break down this doorpost, and I will raise up the dead until they outnumber and devour the living." Sit with that for a moment. She is standing at the threshold of death itself, uninvited, and her opening move is a threat. That is who she has been for the whole of Part 1. It has always worked before. The gatekeeper was named Nettie, and threats did not move him, because he had heard everything from everyone forever. He did not open the gate. Instead, he went down into the palace to his queen. He told Ereshkigal that her sister was standing at the outer gate in all her glory, wearing the 7 emblems of heaven, demanding to be let in. And when Ereshkigal heard it, something crossed her face that was not welcome. The poem says she bit her lip. She slapped her thigh. Whatever tenderness you might imagine between two sisters, put it away. There was history in that palace we are only ever shown the edges of. And Ereshkigal gave Nettie a cold, careful instruction. And it is the machine that the whole rest of this chapter runs on. "Bolt the 7 gates of the Underworld," she said. "Then open them to her, one at a time. But as each gate opens, let the royal garments of heaven be removed from her. Do it slowly. Let her come to me the way everyone comes to me, with nothing." So Inanna began to descend. At the first gate, Nettie stopped her, and he reached out and he lifted the tall crown from her head. "What is this?" she demanded. And he gave her the answer she would hear again and again, at every gate, until it wore her down the way water wears down stone. "Be silent, Inanna. The ways of the Underworld are perfect. They must not be questioned." At the second gate, he took the measuring rod and the lapis linna from her hand, the symbols of her right to rule and to judge. And when she opened her mouth to object, again, "Be silent. The ways of the Underworld are perfect." At the third gate, the small beads from around her throat. At the fourth, the shining stones from across her breast. Each time, a piece of her power. Each time, the same soft, immovable answer. And slowly, gate by gate, she began to understand the thing that made this place different from every battlefield she had ever won. There was nothing here she could threaten. The Underworld wanted nothing that the living could offer it. You cannot frighten a place that has already taken everything from everyone. At the 5th gate, the gold ring from her wrist. At the 6th gate, the breastplate from over her heart. And with each thing they took, she grew smaller and colder and more ordinary. The Queen of Heaven unmade, one ornament at a time. And I want you to feel how patient the cruelty of it is. They are not tearing her apart. They are undressing her, politely, ritually, turning a goddess back into a naked, shivering nobody with the calm of undertakers. And then she came to the 7th gate, and at the 7th gate, they took her royal robe, the last thing, the final layer. And the Queen of Heaven, who had walked up to that first door wearing the sky itself, stepped through the 7th with nothing left on her body at all. No crown, no rod, no armor. Naked and bowed low, stripped of every emblem of who she was, she walked into the throne room of the dead, as bare and as powerless as the newest ghost to arrive. And in that cold hall, on a throne, her sister was waiting for her. And Ereshkigal had not come to grieve with her. Chapter 3. The Eye of Death. Inanna and Ereshkigal. Picture that throne room and let go of everything later ages taught you about hell. There is no fire here, no flames, no torment, no devils with pitchforks, none of it. That imagery came thousands of years later. This is older and, in its way, worse. It is cold. It is grey. It is a vast, silent hall where the dead sit in the dust and eat dust and drink nothing, forever. And at the heart of it, on a throne, sits a queen who has been alone with her grief for longer than the living can even imagine. Ereshkigal. And gathered around her, the 7 judges of that place, the Anunnaki, the ones who pass sentence on every soul that comes down. And they turned their eyes, all of them, onto the naked goddess who had just walked, uninvited and unafraid, into their kingdom. Any sensible visitor would have knelt, would have wept, or begged, or explained. Inanna did none of those things. Even here, at the very bottom of the world, with nothing left, she did the most Inanna thing imaginable. She went for the throne. Naked, stripped, powerless, at the bottom of creation, she moved to seize her sister's seat, to pull Ereshkigal down off it and sit herself in the queen's own place. Think about the sheer, blazing nerve of that. She came down to rule the dead, and she was going to do it now, with nothing, in front of the 7 judges, on the strength of will alone. It was magnificent. It was completely insane. And it was the last thing she did as a living goddess for 3 days and 3 nights. Because the 7 judges fixed their gaze on her and spoke the word against her, the word of guilt. the sentence of that place from which there is no appeal. And Ereshkigal fastened upon her sister the eye of death. I need you to hold on to those 3 words, the eye of death, and carry them with you through the rest of this story, because you are going to meet them again, later, in the last place on earth you would ever expect to find them. And when you do, I want you to feel the floor drop. Under that gaze, the light simply went out of her. The Queen of Heaven, the brightest star in the sky, the goddess who had outwitted the god of wisdom and burned a mountain to ash, became a corpse, a cold, still, lifeless thing. And they took what was left of her, and they hung it on a hook driven into the wall, the way you might hang a slaughtered thing in a cold cellar. And there she stayed, hanging in the dark. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days and 3 nights. The most powerful being in all of creation, reduced to a piece of silence, rotting on a peg at the bottom of everything. And I want you to just sit in that image for a breath, because the Sumerians did not flinch from it, and neither should we. There is no dignity in it, no glow, no peaceful sleep, just meat on a hook in a lightless room, and a queen on a throne nearby who does not look away. This is what the story dares to do to its own heroine. It kills her completely, with 2/3 of the tale still to go. And it leaves her there. Up above, in the world of the living, the sun was going down on the 3rd day. The drum had not sounded yet, but someone had been counting. Someone had been told exactly what to do and exactly when. And that someone was about to keep a promise. Chapter 4: Enki's Rescue and the Food of Life. Ninshubur had waited exactly as she was told, 3 days and 3 nights watching the horizon, and no sign of her mistress. And so the loyal servant did the thing she had sworn to do. She put on a single rough garment, the clothing of the poorest mourner. She tore at her own face in grief. She beat the drum for Inanna through the halls of the gods, a slow, dreadful sound. And she went from door to door, begging someone, anyone, to save a goddess who had walked into death of her own free will. She went first to Enlil, the great god of the air, the most powerful of them all. And Enlil turned her away without a second thought. She wanted the great above, he said, and then she reached for the great below as well. Whoever asks for the underworld does not come back from the underworld. She knew the rule. Let her stay there. A door closed, and the drum went on. She went next to Nema, the moon, who, in the most common telling, is Inanna's own father. And surely a father would move heaven itself for his daughter. And even Nenna refused her. The same cold, tired answer. She reached too far. She knew the law when she broke it. Let her stay. 2 gods, 2 closed doors. And it would have been so easy, right here, for this story to simply end. For the brightest goddess in the world to hang on that hook forever and become a lesson about pride. But Inanna had planned for exactly this. She had known which god would say yes. Ninshubur went to the third door. She went to Enki, the god of wisdom and sweet water, the deep, clever, patient old god, the very one Inanna had robbed blind at his own table back in part 1, drinking his powers away toast by toast. You might think he, of all of them, had reason to leave her hanging. He did not. He was grieved. "What has my daughter done?" he said. "She has gone where she should not have gone. I cannot lose her." And then Enki did the thing that makes this my favorite rescue in all of mythology, because it is nothing like a rescue at all. He did not raise an army. He did not forge a weapon or call down a storm to break the gates of hell. He reached under the fingernail of one hand and he scraped out a tiny bit of dirt. And from that scraping, that nothing, that speck of grime, he shaped a small living creature. And then he reached under a second fingernail, scraped out a little more, and made a second one. 2 tiny beings, the Kagara and the Galatur, and the poem is very deliberate about what they were. They were neither male nor female, neither one thing nor the other. Beings who fit into no category the world had a box for. And that was the entire point. A creature that belongs to no category can slip through gates built to stop everyone who does. Then Enki gave them their tools, and their tools were not swords. To one, he gave the food of life. To the other, the water of life. And then he told them what they would find down there, and how to survive it. And his instruction is the strangest weapon ever carried into the land of the dead. Down below, he told them, you will find the queen, Ereshkigal, and she will be in torment. She will be moaning and writhing like a woman in the agony of giving birth. Naked, her hair swirling around her head like tangled leeks. Utterly alone, with no one in all of creation to comfort her. And when you see her like that, he said, do not fight her. Do not demand. Do not bargain. Simply echo her. When she cries out, "Oh, my insides," you cry back, "Oh, your insides." When she moans, "Oh, my heart," you moan with her, "Oh, your heart." Whatever her pain does, let your voice do the same. Match her, sorrow for sorrow. That was the plan. Not force, not cunning even. Compassion, offered to the one person no one had ever thought to offer it to. So the 2 little creatures slipped down through the 7 gates like flies through a crack under a door, uncounted, unnoticed. And they came into the presence of the Queen of the Dead. And they found her exactly as Enki had promised. Not a monster on a throne, a woman in agony, sobbing, writhing, crying out into an empty hall with no one to hear her. The loneliest being in all of creation. And the 2 little nothings made of dirt began, softly, to grieve along with her. Every cry she gave, they gave back. Every wave of pain that rolled through her, they answered. Oh, your heart, oh, your body, we ache where you ache. And slowly, Ereshkigal lifted her head. because in all the long ages she had sat on that throne, no one had ever simply suffered alongside her. Everyone who came to her came to die, or to beg, or to be judged. No one had ever said, "I feel it too." "Who are you," she asked them, "that you sorrow when I sorrow? That you grieve as if my pain were your own? You are strange to me, and I am grateful for it. Ask me for something. Let me give you a gift." She offered them the flowing river. She offered them the fields heavy with grain. And the two creatures, exactly as Enki had taught them, refused it all and asked only for one thing. That, they said, and pointed to the wall. The corpse hanging on the hook. Give us the body on the peg. And a gift freely offered is a debt, even for the queen of the dead, and so she gave it to them. They laid the body down. One sprinkled it with the food of life, the other with the water of life. And the goddess, who had been a lifeless thing on a hook for 3 days and 3 nights, drew a breath and opened her eyes and was alive again. But the dead do not give refunds, and climbing back up into the light was going to cost her more than climbing down ever had. Chapter 5. A Life for a Life. The Demons Rise. There is a law at the bottom of the world, older and harder than any god, older than Ereshkigal herself. And it is this: no one ascends from the land of the dead. No one walks back up into the sun. And if, by some trick, by some mercy, by some sprinkle of the water of life, a soul does begin to climb back toward the living, then the underworld collects its price. A life for a life. The empty place must be filled. Someone else has to go down. So when Inanna rose from that hook and turned to leave, she did not leave alone. They rose with her. The Gala, the demons of the underworld, sent up as an escort to make certain the debt was paid. And you have to understand what these things were, because they are like nothing else in the whole story. They knew no food. They knew no drink. They ate no offerings and accepted no gifts. You could not bribe them. You could not reason with them. You could not beg them, or charm them, or frighten them, because they wanted nothing but a living being has to give. They were the pure, patient hunger of death itself, given hands and set walking. The old poem describes them, and it is chilling in its plainness. They are the ones, it says, who tear the wife from a man's arms, who snatch the child from the nurse's breast. They feel no tenderness, they know no mercy. They do not care who weeps. And these were the things that now clung to Inanna, one pressed against her front and one against her back, close as her own shadow, walking up out of the 7 gates and out into the light of the living world at her side. And they would not leave, not ever, until she handed them someone to drag back down in her place. And so Inanna walked back across the world she had left behind. No longer a corpse, but not free either. Alive, and trailing death behind her, like the hem of a robe. And everywhere she went, the demons pressed the same unbearable question. This one? Will you give us this one? The first they came to was Ninshabur. Faithful Ninshabur, still in her rough garment of mourning, still filthy and hollow-eyed with grief. The one who had beaten the drum and torn her face and run from god to god and saved her mistress by following every instruction to the letter. And the demons said, "We will take this one. Go home, Inanna, and we will drag her down in your place." And Inanna turned on them, and there was the old fire. "No," she said, "not her. This is the one who mourned me. This is the one who beat the drum in the assembly of the gods and would not rest until I was carried back into the light. I will never hand her to you. Never." And the demons, denied, went on. They came next to one of her sons, a god named Shara, and they found him in his city, dressed in sackcloth, filthy, sunk deep in mourning for her. "Then this one," said the demons. And again she refused. "He sang laments for me. He grieved. You will not touch him." And they went on, and they came to another of her sons, Lulau, and found him too in the dust, weeping. And again she shielded him with her body and her word. "Do you see the rule she is living by, without ever once saying it out loud? Whoever wept for me is safe. Whoever honored my death has earned their life. She was walking through the world protecting, fiercely, every single person who had loved her enough to grieve. And that is exactly what makes what comes next so hard to carry. Because there was one more place to go, one more person left to pass. And it was home, her own city, Uruk, her own great seat, the place where the person who should have mourned her hardest of all was waiting. Her husband, Dumuzi, the shepherd she had loved in the first half of this story. The one I told you, back then, to remember loving. "Remember," I said. "Keep it somewhere safe. Because a day is coming when she will stand in front of him and make a choice you will find almost impossible to forgive. This is that day." And she came into her own city with the demons at her shoulders, expecting to find him broken. And what she found instead broke something in her. He was not in mourning. He was not in sackcloth, not in the dust, not weeping for his lost wife. He was sitting on her magnificent throne, in beautiful, clean clothes, comfortable, at his ease, dressed like a king and lounging in her seat as though her death had been the best thing that ever happened to him, as though he had barely noticed she was gone. Every other soul she loved had torn their clothes for her, and here was the one who shared her bed, glowing with comfort on her stolen throne. And Inanna, fresh from the hook, fresh from 3 days of death, looked at him. And the poem says the thing that stops my breath every single time I read it. She looked at him, and it was the look of death. She fastened upon her own husband the very same eye of death that her sister had fastened upon her. Chapter 6. Dumuzi's Fate and the Origin of the Seasons. "Take him," she said. That was all. 2 words. Take him. And the demons, who had been turned away at every other door, who had walked the whole length of the world holding back their hunger, fell upon Dumuzi all at once. And here, the shepherd who had lounged so comfortably a moment before came apart in pure terror. And I will admit to you that some small part of me pities him even now, even knowing what he did. He wept, and he threw up his hands to the sky, to the sun god Utu. Now Utu was family, Inanna's own brother, the god of light and of justice, and Dumuzi begged him as family. "Utu," he cried, "you are my brother by marriage. Do not let them take me. Change me. Turn my hands into the hands of a snake. Turn my feet into the feet of a snake, so I can twist out of their grip and slip away into the reeds and save my life." And Utu, moved by the tears of his sister's husband, did it. And so began one of the most desperate chases in all of myth. Again and again, the transformed shepherd wriggled free and fled, sliding out of the demon's hands, only to be run down and seized again, and freed again, and to run again, exhausted, hunted across the marshes and the sheepfolds, with death 2 steps behind him the whole way. There is another old poem, called Dumuzi's Dream, that tells of a nightmare he had before the end, thick with omens. The rushes rising up tall and lonely around him, his churn lying silent, his drinking cup fallen from its peg. And it was his sister who listened to that dream and understood, before he did, that her brother was going to die. His sister. Her name was Inanna, and she is, to me, the beating heart of this whole second half. She loved her brother more than she loved her own safety, and when he came to her, shaking and hunted, she hid him. And the demons came to her, and they did to her all the dark things that demons do to make a frightened person talk. And Inanna would not talk. She took everything they gave her, and she kept her silence. And she did not give up where her brother was hiding. Think about that loyalty for a moment. And then think about the husband on the throne. And notice that the deepest love in this story does not come from the lover at all. It comes from a sister. But you cannot outrun the underworld forever. In the end, they found him. Of course they found him. And they took Dumuzi down into the land of the dead to fill the empty place on that hook that Inanna had left behind. The price of her return, paid at last, in full, by the one who had loved her, and the one whose comfort had condemned him. And that could have been the end of it. A cold, bleak, final ending. And some versions of the story stop right there, in the dark, with the shepherd gone. But there is a fuller telling, and it is the one I want to leave in your hands. Because in it, love does something that even death has to bend around. Inanna, who had already suffered so much to shield her brother, would not accept that he was simply gone. She went, and she offered herself in his place. "Let me go down instead of him," she said. "Let me take his place in the dark." And out of that offer, a bargain was struck. One of the oldest and most aching bargains in all of human story. Dumuzi would not stay below forever, and Inanna would not lose him forever either. For half of every year, Dumuzi would go down into the underworld, and for the other half, his sister would take his place beneath the earth, and Dumuzi would rise back up into the light and the world of the living. Brother and sister, trading places across the threshold of death, each one buying the other half a year in the sun, forever. And here is where a family tragedy becomes the heartbeat of the entire world. When Dumuzi is below, the shepherd god gone down into the earth, the land dries and cracks and withers, and the hot, dead, barren season lies heavy over everything. And when Dumuzi climbs back up, when he returns to the surface, the world turns green again, the flocks grow fat, the barley pushes up through the soil, and it is spring. The Sumerians looked at the dying of the year and the greening of the year, that endless wheel that every farmer's whole life depended on, and they said, "That is him. That is Dumuzi, going down and coming back, and going down again." The seasons themselves are the rhythm of a god who dies and rises, over and over, without end, because a goddess once loved him, and then could not forgive him. And the whole living world has been keeping time to it ever since. Epilogue. The oldest resurrection story on Earth. So let us climb back up to the question I asked you at the very top of the stairs before we ever went down. Why would a goddess who has everything walk into the one place no one returns from? And what would it cost her to come back? Now you know the price. It cost her Dumuzi. It cost her the shepherd she loved in the first half of this story, the man whose marriage bed, you may remember, was carved from the very tree she wept over as a small and powerless girl. To climb back into the light, the goddess of love handed the one who loved her into the dark. And I promised you, right at the start, that I would not tell you what to feel about that. So let me set the three ways of seeing it side by side, and then it is yours. Some will tell you she is simply a betrayer, cold and terrible, that the goddess of love failed the very first test of love and chose herself over the man in her bed. Others will tell you she had no choice at all, that the law of the underworld is iron, a life for a life, that she was bound by something older and harder than her own will, and that her grief in the giving was real even so. And others will say, look again. Look at what she came home to. A husband on her throne, in fine clothes, who had not shed a single tear for her death. And ask yourself, truly, what you would have felt, walking up out of your own grave, to find that betrayer, prisoner of a law she could not break. Or a wronged and grieving wife who saw in one glance that she had been mourned by everyone in the world, except the one person who should have mourned her most. I have my own answer, and I still change my mind about it. Some nights one way, and some nights the other. And that, I think, is the whole reason this story has stayed alive for 4,000 years. It refuses to let you off the hook. So do not let me off either. Tell me, down in the comments, where you land. And here is the thing that most people never quite realize about this strange old tale. It is, as far as we know, the oldest story of death and resurrection that human beings ever wrote down. A god goes into the underworld, dies, and rises again, and the living world is renewed by the going and the coming back. Inanna's descent was pressed into wet clay more than 1,000 years before a Greek ever told the tale of Persephone, carried down into the dark and returning each year to make the spring. It stands before the later dying and rising figures the world would come to build whole faiths around. This is very near the headwaters of all of it. When you hear any story of someone going down into death and climbing back into life, you are hearing an echo that begins here, in the mud of Sumer, with a naked goddess on a hook. And her shepherd did not fade quietly from memory either. For thousands of years afterward, people still wept for him. The rites of mourning for the dying god Dumuzi, or Tammuz, as the later peoples of the region came to call him, were still being performed so long after his story was first told that the weeping for Tammuz is named and condemned as idolatry in the pages of the Hebrew Bible itself. Women, sitting and weeping for a Sumerian shepherd at the gate of a temple, more than 1,000 years downstream of the tale we just told. That is how deep this one is buried in us. And I think the reason it will not die, the reason it still has a grip on me after all this time, is not the death, and it is not even the resurrection. It is how she was saved. Not by a hero with a sword, not by an army breaking down the gates of hell. She was brought back to life by two tiny nothing creatures made from the dirt under a god's fingernails, who walked into the presence of the loneliest being in all of creation and, instead of fighting her, simply grieved alongside her until her frozen heart softened enough to give up the body on the hook. The most powerful goddess in the world was resurrected by an act of pure empathy. By someone, at last, sitting with a suffering woman and saying, "I ache where you ache." 4,000 years ago, they already knew that this was the strongest force there is. I find that almost unbearably hopeful. So go outside tonight, the way I asked you to at the very end of part 1, and find that bright star hanging low on the horizon, at dusk or just before the dawn. Venus, her face. And remember what I told you to watch for, that it vanishes, that it drops clean out of the sky and is simply gone for 3 days into the dark before it climbs back up as the morning star. 3 days, the very same 3 days she hung on that hook. The people who first told this story were watching that star die and rise in the sky above their heads, and they wrote down what they saw as the tale of a goddess who went down and paid a terrible price, and came back up into the light. Every spring the shepherd rises and the world goes green. Every winter the debt comes due again and he goes back down. And every single time that evening star disappears and returns, The oldest resurrection story on Earth is being told once more, over your head, whether there is anyone left below who remembers it or not. Thank you for coming all the way down into the dark with me and all the way back up into the light. If this story moved you, give it a like so it finds the next person standing at the top of their own stairs. Subscribe so you do not miss where we wander next, and tell me, now that you finally know how it ends, was she a monster? Or did she have no choice at all? I truly want to know where you land. Until then, thank you for listening. Yours, Lady Mythos.